Kash Patel walked through the doors of the Oakwood Community Center on Monday morning with his usual quiet steps. He carried his worn leather briefcase in one hand and a thermos of green tea in the other. The front desk lady, Mary, smiled and waved at him. Kash gave her a small nod. He was not rude, just shy. He had been working at the community center for 3 years now, helping elderly people with their taxes and money problems. The seniors loved him because he was patient and kind. The other staff barely noticed him most days. Kash set his things down at his small desk in the corner of the main office. He turned on his computer and sipped his tea while waiting for it to start up. Through the thin walls, he could hear Steve Johnson's loud laugh from the break room. Steve worked in the sports department and was known for his big personality and louder voice. Most people at the center liked Steve because he was fun and told good jokes. He organized the basketball games and coached the Little League team on weekends. Lisa Martinez's voice joined Steve's. She was the art teacher who ran painting classes for both kids and adults. Lisa had worked at the center for 5 years and was friends with almost everyone. She was pretty with dark curly hair and always wore colorful clothes with paint stains on them. Unlike Kash, Lisa loved being the center of attention. Kash tried to focus on his work, but their voices grew louder as they walked toward the main office. "Did you see the flyer Karen put up?" Lisa asked Steve. "The talent show is happening next month." "Yeah, I saw it," Steve replied as they entered the office. "Are you going to do your pottery demonstration again this year?" Lisa nodded excitedly. "I'm thinking of making a vase while blindfolded. What about you?" "Basketball tricks, of course," Steve said. He spun an imaginary ball on his finger. "I've been practicing a new move." They both stopped talking when they noticed Kash sitting at his desk. For a moment, no one spoke. Kash was used to this. He often made people feel awkward without meaning to. "Morning, Kash," Lisa finally said. "Good morning," Kash replied softly, looking back at his computer screen. Steve and Lisa might have continued to their desks, but Steve suddenly got a look on his face that Kash had seen before. It was the look Steve got when he was about to play a joke on someone. "Hey, Kash," Steve said, walking over to Kash's desk. "You should sign up for the talent show this year." Kash looked up in surprise. No one had ever suggested he join any center activities before. "Me?" he asked. "I don't have any talents to show." Lisa caught on to what Steve was doing and came over too. "Everyone has a talent. Maybe you could sing or something." Steve tried not to smile too widely. "Yeah, singing would be perfect for you." Kash noticed the quick look they shared. He understood right away what was happening. They thought quiet, boring Kash trying to sing would be funny. They wanted him to make a fool of himself on stage. "I don't think so," Kash said, turning back to his computer. "Come on," Steve pushed. "The talent show is for raising money for the center's new roof. Everyone is participating. Even old Mr. Jenkins is doing his magic act again." "It'll be fun," Lisa added. "No one expects you to be perfect. It's just for laughs and a good cause." Kash was about to say no again when a memory suddenly came to him. He saw his father standing in their small living room, hands moving through the air as he sang. His father, Raj Patel, had never been a professional singer, but he had loved opera music more than anything. Every evening after work, he would play records of famous opera singers and sing along. He had taught Kash how to breathe properly, how to hold notes, and how to feel the music in his heart. "The most beautiful things in life should be shared," his father used to say. When Kash was 16, his father had gotten sick. During the months of his illness, Kash would sing to him when the pain was bad. It was their special connection. After his father died, Kash never sang in front of anyone again. It hurt too much. "Kash? Hello?" "Earth to Kash." Steve was waving his hand in front of Kash's face. Kash blinked, coming back to the present moment. "Sorry, what?" "The talent show," Lisa said. "Will you do it? We need more people to sign up." Kash should have said no. He knew they were setting him up as the joke act, but his father's words echoed in his mind. Maybe it was time to share his music again. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll sign up." Steve's eyebrows shot up in surprise. He clearly hadn't expected Kash to agree. Great, I'll add your name to the list. What will you be doing? I'll sing, Kash said. Lisa couldn't hide her smile. Perfect. The show is on Friday, May 30th. You have 4 weeks to practice. That should be enough time, Kash said, his voice still soft but with a hint of something that made both Steve and Lisa look at him more closely. After they walked away, whispering and laughing to each other, Kash opened his bottom desk drawer. Inside was a small photo of his father that he kept at work. In the picture, Raj Patel stood next to an old record player, smiling widely. I think it's time, Dad, Kash whispered to the photo. At lunch, Kash ate his sandwich alone on a bench outside the center. He could see Steve, Lisa, and some other staff members sitting at a picnic table nearby. They were talking and laughing, and Kash knew they were probably talking about him. He took out his phone and searched for something. When he found it, he put in his earbuds and pressed play. The beautiful music of Nessun Dorma filled his ears. It had been his father's favorite aria. As the music played, Kash closed his eyes and imagined singing it on stage. Not for Steve, or Lisa, or anyone at the center, but for his father. When Kash returned to the office, Karen White, the center director, stopped him in the hallway. Kash, I heard you signed up for the talent show. That's wonderful. Karen was a kind woman in her 50s who always tried to include everyone in center activities. Yes, I'm going to sing, Kash said. Fantastic. What song will you perform? It's a surprise, Kash replied. Karen looked pleased. Well, I'm happy you're participating. It's good to see you getting involved. Later that afternoon, as Kash was helping an elderly woman named Betty with her tax forms, he heard Steve telling Paul Garcia from the maintenance department about Kash's talent show entry. It's going to be hilarious, Steve said, not realizing Kash could hear them. Can you imagine? The guy barely talks and now he's going to sing in front of everyone. Paul laughed. Maybe he'll sing the tax code or recite spreadsheet formulas. Their laughter bothered Kash less than it might have before he had made a decision. After finishing with Betty, he packed up his things and left work exactly at 5 o'clock. Instead of going straight home, he drove to a music store across town. The store owner, an older man named Joe, looked up when Kash walked in. Can I help? You find something? Yes, Kash said. I need sheet music for Nessun Dorma and a good recording to practice with. Joe raised his eyebrows. That's a challenging piece. Are you a tenor? Kash nodded. I used to sing it with my father. Joe smiled and led Kash to the classical music section. It's not often I get requests for Puccini these days. Your father taught you well if you can handle this area. He did, Kash said. And I think it's time I remembered that. As Kash drove home with his purchases, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Excitement. Steve and Lisa had meant to make him the joke of the talent show. They had no idea what they had actually done. They had given him a reason to sing again. At home, Kash moved the coffee table in his small living room and set up the keyboard his father had given him for his 18th birthday. He hadn't played it in years, but his fingers remembered the keys. He played the opening notes of Nessun Dorma and began to sing softly. His voice was rusty at first, but as he continued, it grew stronger. By the time he reached the powerful final notes, tears were streaming down his face. But they weren't. Tears of sadness. For the first time in many years, Kash Patel was remembering who he really was. The next morning, Kash arrived at the community center earlier than usual. He wanted to check if there was a piano he could use for practice during his lunch breaks. The center was quiet, with only the cleaning lady mopping the floors. Kash walked to the main hall where the talent show would take place. There, on the small stage, stood an old upright piano. He touched the keys gently, careful not to make too much noise. Do you play? The voice startled him. Karen White, the center director, stood at the back of the hall with a stack of papers in her arms. A little, Kash answered. I was wondering if I could use the piano sometimes to practice for the talent show. Karen smiled warmly. Of course you can. The hall is usually empty during lunch hours. Feel free to use it then. She looked at him with curious eyes. I didn't know you were musical, Kash. You're full of surprises. Kash just nodded and thanked her. He wasn't ready to share more. Not yet. Over the next week, Kash developed a new routine. He would eat his lunch quickly, then slip into the hall to practice for 30 minutes. He kept the piano volume low, working on the melody and timing without singing out loud. He didn't want anyone to hear him before the show. After work, Kash drove to a small park across town where no one from the center would see him. He sat in his car with the windows rolled up and practiced singing with the recording he had bought. His voice grew stronger each day as he remembered his father's lessons about breathing and posture. At the community center, the excitement about the talent show was growing. A large poster appeared in the main entrance with the names of all participants. When people saw Kash's name on the list, the whispers started. Kash Patel, the quiet tax guy? One of the swimming instructors asked Lisa during coffee break. Yes, Lisa said with a grin. Steve convinced him to sign up. He's going to sing. Sing? Him? The instructor laughed. This I have to see. Such conversations happened more and more, always when people thought Kash couldn't hear them. But Kash noticed the looks and the sudden silences when he entered rooms. Instead of making him nervous, these reactions made him more determined. On Thursday afternoon, Steve caught Kash as he was leaving the lunch hall. So, Kash, ready for your big moment next week? Steve asked with a wide smile. We're all looking forward to your performance. I'm preparing, Kash said simply. What song are you going to sing? Maybe we can help you practice, Steve offered, barely hiding his amusement. No need, Kash replied. But thank you. Steve looked a bit disappointed by Kash's calm response. Well, just remember it's all for fun. No one expects a professional show. Kash nodded and walked away, leaving Steve puzzled by his confidence. That evening, Kash did something he hadn't done in years. He called his mother, who lived in another state. Kash, what a lovely surprise, his mother said when she answered the phone. Is everything okay? Everything is fine, Mom, Kash said. I just wanted to tell you something. I'm going to sing in a talent show at the community center where I work. There was a moment of silence on the line. You're going to sing? In public? His mother's voice was filled with surprise and emotion. You haven't sung since Dad died. I know, Kash finished for her. I think it's time. Oh, Kash, his mother said softly. Your father would be so happy. What will you sing? Nessun Dorma, Kash replied. Dad's favorite. His mother made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He always said you sang it better than him, even when you were just a teenager. After a pause, she asked, Would you like me to come? I could take the bus and— No, Mom, Kash interrupted gently. I need to do this on my own first, but if it goes well, I promise I'll sing for you next time you visit. After talking with his mother, Kash felt a new sense of purpose. He was no longer just proving something to Steve and Lisa. He was reconnecting with a part of himself he had lost when his father died. The next day at work, Kash noticed something different. Lisa wasn't laughing when she talked about him anymore. During lunch, he overheard her talking to Steve in the break room. Maybe we shouldn't have pushed him into this, she said. What if he gets really nervous and freezes on stage? Everyone will laugh at him. That's what talent shows are for, Steve replied. Not everyone can be good. The audience enjoys the bad acts as much as the good ones. Still, Kash is so quiet. This might really embarrass him, Lisa continued. I'm starting to feel bad about it. Too late now, Steve said. Besides, he agreed to do it. No one forced him. Kash walked away before they noticed him. He wasn't angry at them. In a strange way, he was grateful. Without their joke, he might never have found his voice again. The weekend before the talent show, Kash made an important decision. He found the phone number of his old vocal coach, Mrs. Henderson. She had taught him briefly as a teenager, when his father had insisted he take some proper lessons. Kash Patel, Mrs. Henderson said when he called. It's been 15 years? How are you, dear boy? I'm well, Mrs. Henderson, Kash replied. I was wondering if you might have time for 1 or 2 lessons this week. I'm performing in a talent show on Friday and I could use some help. Of course. I'm semi-retired now, but I still teach a few special students, she said. What will you be singing? Nessun Dorma. Mrs. Henderson laughed with delight. Ambitious as ever. Your father would be proud. Come over tomorrow at 4 p.m. On Monday after work, Kash drove to Mrs. Henderson's small house in the suburbs. The living room looked exactly as he remembered it. The grand piano in the corner, music books stacked neatly on shelves, and pictures of famous opera singers on the walls. Mrs. Henderson, now in her 70s with silver hair and bright eyes, asked him to sing the aria for her first. Kash was nervous, but he closed his eyes and began. When he finished, he opened his eyes to see Mrs. Henderson staring at him with her hand over her heart. My dear boy, she said softly, you've been hiding a treasure all these years. For the next 2 hours, she worked with him on his breathing, his posture, and the emotional delivery of the piece. When Kash left, he felt more confident than ever. I'll be there on Friday, Mrs. Henderson told him as he was leaving. In the back row. Sing to me if you get nervous. The week of the talent show arrived and the community center was buzzing with excitement. Posters were up everywhere, tickets were selling fast, and participants were practicing whenever they could find space. On Wednesday, Karen asked all performers to do a quick sound check on the stage. When it was Kash's turn, he only checked the microphone level without singing. Don't you want to practice your song? Karen asked. No, Kash said. I'd rather wait until Friday. Steve, who was watching from the side, smirked. Stage fright already, Kash? Kash smiled slightly. Just saving my voice. On Thursday night, the eve of the talent show, Kash couldn't sleep. He paced his apartment, doubts flooding his mind. What if his voice cracked? What if he forgot the words? What if everyone did laugh at him? He sat at his keyboard and played the opening notes of Nessun Dorma. As the familiar melody filled his small living room, he remembered his father's words. When you sing, you don't sing with your voice. You sing with your heart. Kash closed his eyes and began to sing softly. With each note, his doubts faded. By the time he reached the powerful final vincero, his decision was made. Tomorrow he would not hold back. Tomorrow he would sing with all his heart. In his bedroom, Kash opened his closet and took out the garment bag at the back. Inside was his father's black suit. Kash had never worn it before. He tried it on now and stood before the mirror. Dans le corps. Suit needed some adjustments. His father had been shorter, but with a few safety pins it would work for tomorrow. I hope I make you proud, Dad, Kash whispered to his reflection. The day of the talent show arrived with clear skies and warm sunshine. Kash woke up early after a restless night. He made himself a cup of tea and stood by his apartment window, looking out at the quiet street below. Today was the day he would sing in public for the first time in 15 years. His stomach felt tight with nerves. Kash went through his morning routine slowly and carefully. He shaved closely, combed his hair neatly, and laid out his father's black suit on the bed. He had pinned it in a few places last night to make it fit better. The suit was old-fashioned but made of good quality material that had lasted well over the years. At work, the community center was buzzing with activity. Volunteers hung colorful streamers in the main hall. Staff members moved chairs into rows facing the stage. Karen rushed around with clipboards and lists, making sure everything was ready. The talent show would start at 7 p.m., but participants were asked to arrive by 6 p.m. for final preparations. Kash sat at his desk trying to focus on his work. He drank hot water with honey and lemon throughout the day to soothe his throat. At lunchtime, he didn't go to the hall to practice as he had been doing all week. Instead, he sat quietly in his car, eyes closed, mentally going through the song. Steve poked his head into the office around 2 p.m. Hey Kash, ready for tonight? He asked with a grin. I told everyone in my basketball group to come. We've got a whole cheering section for you. Kash looked up and nodded. Thank you, he said simply. Steve seemed unsure how to respond to Kash's calm manner. He had expected Kash to be nervous or worried. Well, break a leg, he said before leaving. At 5 p.m., Kash packed up his things and went to the men's restroom. He changed into his father's suit, which now fit quite well with the adjustments he had made. He looked at himself in the mirror and took a deep breath. The face looking back at him was his own, but something in his eyes reminded him of his father, a quiet determination, a hidden strength. By 6 p.m., most of the performers had gathered in a small room behind the stage. Lisa was there in a paint-splattered apron, ready for her pottery demonstration. Steve was bouncing a basketball, practicing tricks. There was also Mr. Jenkins with his magic props, a group of teenage girls in dance costumes, and several other staff members with various instruments. Karen came in with her clipboard. "Everyone ready? We have a full house tonight. Remember, this is all for fun and to raise money for our new roof. Just do your best and enjoy yourselves." The performers chatted excitedly, but Kash stood a little apart from the group, still and quiet. Lisa noticed him and came over. "Nice suit," she said, looking at him with new eyes. "You look different tonight." "Thank you," Kash replied. "It was my father's." Lisa seemed about to say something more, but Karen called for their attention. "Here's the final order for tonight," Karen announced, reading from her clipboard. "First, the children's choir. Then Mr. Jenkins' magic act. Third, Steve's basketball demonstration. Fourth, the teen dance group. Fifth, Kash's vocal performance. Sixth, Lisa's pottery demonstration. And we'll finish with the staff band." Kash felt a wave of relief. He wasn't first, which gave him time to calm his nerves, but he wasn't last, either, which meant he didn't have to wait too long. At 7 p.m. sharp, Karen went on stage to welcome the audience. The main hall was packed with people, families, seniors, staff members, and many from the local community. The seats were filled, and some people stood at the back. "Welcome to our annual Oakwood Community Center talent show," Karen said into the microphone. "We have a wonderful lineup of performances for you tonight. All proceeds from ticket sales will go directly to our roof repair fund. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show." The children's choir went first, singing a sweet but slightly off-key version of "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." The audience clapped loudly when they finished, especially the proud parents. Mr. Jenkins performed his magic act next, pulling colorful scarves from his sleeves and making a rabbit appear from his hat. Despite being 82 years old, his hands moved quickly, and he charmed the audience with his old-fashioned jokes. Steve's basketball demonstration went well. He spun the ball on his finger, did some impressive dribbling between his legs, and finished by making a backward shot into a small hoop he had set up on stage. His friends cheered loudly from the back row. The teen dance group performed an energetic hip-hop routine that had the younger audience members clapping along to the beat. Then it was Kash's turn. As Karen announced, "Next up, we have Kash Patel." With a vocal performance, Kash felt his heart beating fast in his chest. There was polite applause mixed with a few whispers. He could see Steve and his friends in the back row, elbowing each other and smirking. Lisa sat nearby, looking more nervous than excited now. Kash walked to center stage, his steps measured and calm despite his racing heart. The bright lights made it hard to see the audience clearly, which helped a little with his nerves. He nodded to Jim, the elderly man who played piano for the community center's events. They had met briefly earlier in the week, and Kash had given him the sheet music for Nessun Dorma. Jim looked surprised when he saw the music, but he had nodded and said, "I played this years ago. Let's see if these old fingers remember it." Now Jim began to play the opening notes. The beautiful, haunting melody filled the hall. Kash closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and began to sing. The first notes came out clear and strong, surprising even him. Years of practice with his father, the recent sessions with Mrs. Henderson, and all the private rehearsals had prepared him well. As he continued to sing, he felt something wonderful happening. The nervousness melted away, replaced by the pure joy of the music. The aria told the story of a prince determined to win the heart of a cold princess. Nessun Dorma meant none shall sleep, as the prince declared that no one would sleep until he won his love. The music built slowly, growing in power and emotion. Kash opened his eyes and saw that the audience had gone completely still. The smirks were gone from the faces in the back row. Steve sat with his mouth slightly open. Lisa had her hand over her heart. As Kash approached the most powerful part of the song, he spotted Mrs. Henderson in the back row just as she had promised. She was smiling with tears in her eyes. Next to her sat an older woman Kash hadn't expected to see, his mother. She must have taken the bus after all, wanting to surprise him. Seeing her gave Kash an extra surge of emotion. The final section of Nessun Dorma was famous for its power and difficulty. The tenor had to hit and hold several high notes while conveying triumph and determination. As Kash reached this section, his voice soared through the hall, rich and clear. He sang the final Vincerò, I will win, with all his heart, holding the last note perfectly. When the last note faded, there was complete silence in the hall. For a moment, Kash worried that his performance had been so unexpected that people didn't know how to react. Then from the back row, Mrs. Henderson stood up, her hands coming together in the first clap. Like a wave, the applause spread through the audience. One by one, people rose to their feet until the entire hall was standing. The applause grew louder, with some people cheering and others wiping tears from their eyes. Kash stood on stage overwhelmed by the response. He had never imagined this moment when he agreed to participate in the talent show. He looked toward the back row again and saw that Steve was now standing too, clapping with a stunned expression on his face. Next to him, Lisa was crying and applauding at the same time. In that moment, Kash felt his father's presence strongly, as if he were standing right beside him. The most beautiful things in life should be shared, his father had said. Now, finally, Kash understood what he had meant. The applause seemed to go on forever. Kash stood on the stage, not quite knowing what to do. He had never received this kind of attention before. Karen appeared at his side and gently guided him to take a bow. He bent forward slightly, the motion feeling strange but somehow right. The audience clapped even louder. Karen leaned toward the microphone. Wow. What an amazing performance from our own Kash Patel. I think we all just discovered a hidden talent in our midst. She turned to Kash with wide eyes. I had no idea you could sing like that. Kash simply nodded, still unable to find words. Karen gave his arm a squeeze before announcing, Let's continue with our next performer. Lisa Martinez will now show us her pottery skills. Kash walked off the stage on shaky legs. His heart was still racing, but now it was from excitement rather than fear. As he stepped behind the curtain, several of the other performers came up to him with amazed expressions. That was incredible. Where did you learn to sing like that? Are you secretly a professional? Kash smiled shyly at their questions but didn't have a chance to answer. Mrs. Henderson pushed through the small crowd and pulled him into a tight hug. My dear boy, she said, her voice thick with emotion. That was magnificent. Your father would have been so proud. Thank you for coming, Kash said softly. I wouldn't have missed it for the world, Mrs. Henderson replied, and neither would someone else. She stepped aside to reveal Kash's mother standing behind her. Mom. Kash moved forward to embrace her. I told you not to come. His mother's eyes were wet with tears. And miss my son's return to music? Never. She held his face between her hands. You sounded just like him, but also like yourself. It was beautiful. They moved to the side of the backstage area so Lisa could prepare for her performance. Kash watched as she walked on stage, looking a bit dazed. She glanced toward where he stood with his mother and Mrs. Henderson, gave him a small smile, then turned her attention to her pottery wheel. How did you two find each other? Kash asked his mother and Mrs. Henderson. I called her, Mrs. Henderson explained. I still had her number from all those years ago. When you told me you were singing again, I thought she should be here. His mother squeezed his hand. I took the first bus this morning. Mrs. Henderson picked me up from the station. On stage, Lisa was creating a vase while explaining the process to the audience. Her hands moved skillfully over the clay, but she seemed distracted. She kept glancing toward the wings where Kash stood. Kash felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to see Karen standing there with a man he didn't recognize. Kash, this is Frank Bennett, Karen said, He's the music teacher at the high school and director of the community choir. Frank extended his hand. That was quite a performance, Mr. Patel. I've been directing the choir for 15 years and I've never heard anyone in this town sing like that. Kash shook his hand. Thank you. We're always looking for good tenors, Frank continued. They're rare, you know. Would you consider joining us? We meet on Tuesday evenings. Before Kash could answer, more people approached to congratulate him. Karen gently led his mother and Mrs. Henderson to seats in the audience so they could watch the rest of the show. Kash stayed backstage, feeling overwhelmed by all the attention. Lisa finished her pottery demonstration to enthusiastic applause, though not a standing ovation like Kash had received. When she came backstage, she walked straight to him. Kash, she said, wiping clay from her hands with a towel. I don't even have words. Why didn't you tell anyone you could sing like that? Kash shrugged. No one ever asked. Lisa's face flushed. I feel terrible about how this all started. Steve and I thought. She stopped, looking embarrassed. I know what you thought, Kash said quietly. It's okay. Lisa shook her head. No, it's not okay. We misjudged you and I'm sorry. The staff band was the final act of the night. They played a few popular songs while Kash sat with his mother and Mrs. Henderson in the audience. People kept turning to look at him and several stopped by to shake his hand or pat him on the shoulder. When the show ended, Karen announced the total amount of money raised for the new roof. Thanks to your generosity, we've raised $3,500 tonight. That's the most we've ever collected at a talent show. The audience clapped, and people began to gather their things to leave. Many crowded around Kash, asking questions about his singing, background, and requesting future performances. His mother watched with a proud smile, occasionally adding stories about how he used to sing with his father. Across the room, Kash noticed Steve standing alone, looking unsure of himself. When their eyes met, Steve hesitated, then walked over. Kash, Steve began, his usual confidence gone. I don't know what to say. That was incredible. Thank you, Kash replied. I need to apologize, Steve continued. I thought, well, we all thought. He struggled to find the right words. You thought the quiet tax guy couldn't possibly have any real talent. Kash finished for him. Steve nodded, looking genuinely ashamed. I was wrong. We all were. I'm sorry for how this started. Kash considered Steve for a moment. He could hold a grudge, but what would that accomplish? Sometimes we need a push to share the best parts of ourselves, he said finally. In a way, I should thank you. Steve looked surprised, then relieved. So we're good? We're good, Kash confirmed. As the crowd thinned, Karen approached Kash with an excited expression. Kash, I've had an idea. The center is hosting a fundraising dinner for local businesses next month. Would you consider performing again? I think it would be a huge draw. Before Kash could answer, Frank Bennett joined them. And please think about the choir. We perform at the holiday concert in December. A voice like yours would be our star attraction. Kash felt a bit overwhelmed by these offers. For 15 years he had kept his singing private, a painful reminder of his father. Now suddenly people wanted him to perform regularly. His mother, sensing his hesitation, stepped in. I think Kash needs some time to think about all this. It's been an emotional evening. Karen and Frank nodded understandingly and moved away after giving Kash their contact information. Mrs. Henderson gave him a warm hug before leaving as well. I'm staying at your place tonight, his mother told him. I hope that's okay. My return bus isn't until tomorrow afternoon. Of course it's okay, Kash said, relieved to have her company. We have a lot to talk about. As they were about to leave, Lisa approached them again. Kash, a few of us are going to the diner across the street to celebrate. Would you and your mother like to join us? Kash looked at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. We'd like that, he said. At the diner, Kash found himself sitting at a large table with Lisa, Steve, Karen, and several other staff members he usually avoided at work functions. His mother sat beside him, occasionally squeezing his hand under. the table when she sensed he was feeling uncomfortable with all the attention. "So, Kash," Karen said when their food arrived, "you've been hiding this amazing talent from us for 3 years. Are there any other secrets we should know about? Are you secretly a chess champion or an Olympic athlete too?" Everyone laughed, and to his surprise, Kash found himself smiling as well. "No other secret talents," he said. "Just the singing." "Where did you learn?" Lisa asked. "Did you study music in college?" Kash shook his head. "My father taught me. He loved opera. He wasn't a professional, but he had a beautiful voice." "Had?" Steve asked quietly. "He died when I was 19, Kash explained. "I stopped singing after that, until now." The table went quiet for a moment. "Well," Karen said finally, raising her coffee cup, "I think we should toast to Kash's father. He gave his son a wonderful gift." Everyone raised their cups. "To Kash's father," they said in unison. Kash felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the hot tea he was drinking. For the first time in many years, talking about his father didn't bring only pain. Now it also brought pride and a sense of connection. As the evening went on, Kash found himself talking more than he had in years. He told stories about his father's love of music, about the records they used to listen to together, and about the lessons his father had given him. His colleagues listened with genuine interest, seeing a side of Kash they had never known existed. When it was time to leave, Steve insisted on paying for everyone's meal. "It's the least I can do," he said with a meaningful look at Kash. Outside the diner, as people were saying goodnight, Lisa touched Kash's arm. "Will things be different now?" she asked. "At work, I mean." Kash thought about it. Would he suddenly become outgoing and social? Probably not. That wasn't who he was. But something had changed tonight. "Some things will be different," he said. "But I'll still help the seniors with their taxes." Lisa laughed. "Good. They'd be lost without you." After a pause, she added, "And thank you for forgiving us. For the joke, I mean." "Thank you for the push," Kash replied. The Monday after the talent show, Kash arrived at work to find things had changed. As he walked through the community center, people stopped to greet him. Some even clapped him on the back or gave him a thumbs up. At the front desk, Mary handed him a stack of messages. "All these people called for you this morning," she said with a smile. "Looks like you're famous now." Kash took the messages with surprise. There were notes from local choir directors, a music teacher at the elementary school, and even the organizer of the town's summer festival. All wanted him to sing at their events. When he reached his office, Kash found a small gift bag on his desk with a card signed by Lisa. Inside was a coffee mug that said Hidden Talent and a CD of famous tenor arias. Kash smiled and placed the mug next to his computer. Steve popped his head in a few minutes later. "Morning, superstar," he said with a grin that was friendly rather than mocking. "How was the rest of your weekend?" "Good," Kash replied. "I took my mother to the bus station yesterday afternoon. We had a nice visit." Steve nodded and seemed about to leave, then hesitated. "Listen, a few of us are going to lunch at the new sandwich shop today. Want to join us?" 6 months ago, even 1 week ago, Kash would have politely declined such an invitation. He preferred eating alone, reading a book during his lunch break. But today, he found himself saying, "Yes, that sounds nice." Steve looked pleasantly surprised. "Great. We'll stop by around noon." Throughout the morning, Kash tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept drifting back to the talent show. He had sung in public again after 15 years of silence. More importantly, he had connected with people in a way he hadn't since his father died. The thought made him both happy and a little scared. At noon, Steve, Lisa, and Paul from maintenance stopped by his office. Kash noticed that Paul looked a bit embarrassed, probably remembering his jokes about Kash singing tax codes. But Kash greeted him warmly, and soon they were all walking to the sandwich shop, chatting about the success of the talent show. "Karen says we raised more money than ever before," Lisa told them as they found a table. "She thinks it's because word spread about the amazing performances, especially yours, Kash." "I'm glad it helped the center," Kash said. "So," Paul asked between bites of his turkey sandwich, Are you going to accept any of those offers to perform again? Kash had been thinking about this question all weekend. Part of him wanted to return to his quiet life, to keep his singing private again. But another part, a stronger part, remembered the joy he had felt on stage sharing his music with others. I think I will, he said finally. Not all of them, but some. I'm going to join Frank Bennett's choir, for one thing. That's great, Lisa said with genuine enthusiasm. They practice right at the center on Tuesday evenings, don't they? Maybe some of us could stay late and come hear you sing sometimes. Kash smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the soup he was eating. That would be nice. After lunch, as they walked back to the center, Steve asked Kash a question that had clearly been on his mind. I'm still curious. Why did you agree to be in the talent show when we first asked you? You must have known we were, well, setting me up as a joke? Kash finished for him. Steve nodded, looking embarrassed again. I knew, Kash continued. But it gave me a reason to sing again. Sometimes we need a push, even if it comes from an unexpected place. The weeks that followed brought many changes to Kash's life. He joined the community choir and quickly became their lead tenor. Frank Bennett gave him solos in their spring concert, which drew the largest audience the choir had ever had. At the community center, Kash was no longer just the quiet tax guy. He still helped seniors with their financial questions, but he also started a small music appreciation group that met on Thursday evenings. They listened to different styles of music and discussed the emotions each piece evoked. To Kash's surprise, many people signed up, including some who had been at the talent show. Karen asked him to sing at the center's fundraising dinner, where his performance of Time to Say Goodbye brought another standing ovation. This time, Kash felt more comfortable on stage, even enjoying the applause rather than being overwhelmed by it. Steve and Lisa became his friends, not just colleagues. They often invited him to join them for lunch or after-work activities. Kash didn't always say yes. He still valued his quiet time, but he said yes much more often than he would have before the talent show. One Tuesday evening in May, 2 months after the talent show, Kash arrived early for choir practice. As he set up his music folder, Mrs. Henderson walked in. She had joined the choir too, saying Kash had inspired her to return to music after her retirement. I have something for you, she said, handing him a small package wrapped in brown paper. Kash opened it carefully. Inside was an old record, Pavarotti, singing Nessun Dorma and other famous arias. This was your father's, Mrs. Henderson explained. He lent it to me years ago and I never returned it. I found it when I was cleaning out my music cabinet last week. Kash ran his fingers over the worn cover. I remember this record. We used to play it all the time. He was so proud of your voice, Mrs. Henderson said softly. Even prouder than he was of his own. He always said you would do great things with your music. Kash thought about how his life had changed in the past 2 months. He wasn't famous and he wasn't performing in grand opera houses, but he was sharing his music with his community, bringing joy to people, and feeling more connected than he had in years. Maybe that was what his father had meant by great things. Thank you for this, he said, carefully putting the record back in its paper wrapping. And thank you for pushing me back toward music. You're welcome, Mrs. Henderson replied. But I didn't push you very hard. You were ready to return to it. Later that evening, after choir practice, Kash drove home with the windows down and music playing. At a stoplight, he caught the eye of a driver in the next car, a young woman, who smiled when she heard the opera aria coming from his speakers. Kash smiled back, something he would never have done 6 months ago. At home, he carefully placed his father's record on the shelf next to his own growing collection of music. Then he sat at his keyboard and began to play, singing softly at first, then with more confidence. The notes filled his apartment, no longer trapped inside him. The next day at work, Karen stopped by his office with an excited expression. Kash, I just had the best idea. The center's 50th anniversary is coming up in September. What if we organize a special concert? You could be our headline performer. 6 months ago, such a suggestion would have terrified Kash. Now he found himself nodding thoughtfully. That sounds interesting. Tell me more. As Karen outlined her ideas, Kash thought about how one small event, being asked to sing as a joke, had changed the course of his life. He thought about Steve and Lisa, who had meant to embarrass him but had instead given him the push he needed. He thought about his father, who had taught him that music was meant to be shared. That evening, Kash called his mother. "I'm going to headline a concert at the center," he told her. "In September, will you come?" "I wouldn't miss it for the world," she replied. "Your father would be so proud of you, Kash." "I know," Kash said softly. "I can feel it." After they hung up, Kash opened his window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere up there, he liked to think, his father was listening. Kash began to sing, softly, not an opera aria this time, but a simple folk song his father had taught him as a child. His voice drifted out into the night, no longer hidden, no longer silent. In the apartment next door, someone opened their window wider to listen. Across the street, a couple walking their dog paused to hear the beautiful voice floating through the air. And in the community center's office, Karen was already designing posters for An Evening with Kash Patel, smiling as she imagined another full house, another standing ovation. The joke had backfired in the best possible way, giving Kash back his voice and his connection to others. As he sang the final notes of his father's favorite folk song, Kash knew he would never be silent again.